Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It is of extreme concern to us as a government.
An Abbotsford man sentenced to death in China for drug smuggling. Also,
BC's police watchdog investigates a deadly crash near Nanaimo. And
it's got to be dealt with, and so we take it very seriously.
Rat Research, the unique program to tackle our growing infestation problem.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening. The family of an Abbotsford man sentenced to death in China is asking the Trudeau government to protect its citizens.
The plea comes after a Chinese court ordered the execution of 36-year-old Robert Lloyd Schellenberg. He had originally been facing a 15-year prison sentence for drug trafficking, but a retrial was ordered last month. As
CBC Asia correspondent Sasha Petrusek reports, the case had been going on for years, but came under the spotlight amid heightened tensions between Canada and China.
By any standard, what happened today was lightning fast in court. Tough new charges were introduced by the Chinese prosecutors. There were legal arguments. There was a witness that was called who testified that he worked with Robert Schellenberg to pack these drugs into car tires and to try to ship them out of the country to Australia. And by the end of the day, just a few hours later, there was a verdict. Compare that to the original trial, which took 4 years to come up with a verdict that put Schellenberg in prison for 15 years. That was the sentence. This really was an incredibly fast procedure, but it is not surprising in a way, because in China, when there's a political imperative, things get done very, very quickly. And it's widely known that the courts are under the control of the ruling Communist Party. So in this case, everything was pushed out of the way. The government here has denied that this has anything to do with the Huawei case in Canada, but many people suspect that it does, only because of the timing, if nothing else. If in fact this goes through, Robert Schellenberg will be the first Canadian to be executed by the legal system here in China. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Beijing.
We will have more on this arrest and the connection to the Huawei arrest here in Vancouver last month. That's later in tonight's cast.
BC's police watchdog is looking into whether a Nanaimo RCMP officer had anything to do with a deadly crash on Vancouver Island early this morning. 2 men were killed after their vehicles hit head-on on Highway 1. The CBC's Dan Burrett joins us live with more. Dan, what happened?
It is a brutal crash, Anita and Mike, one that shut down that highway for 10 hours. The RCMP says around 1 this morning, an officer tried to stop a white GMC pickup truck. The driver allegedly didn't stop and was last seen driving south in the northbound lane on the Trans-Canada. Mounties say that same white truck was later involved in that head-on crash with a red SUV in the northbound lane. Both drivers died at the scene. The Independent Investigations Office is now involved to figure out what, if any, role the actions of the police officer may have played in that crash.
Then at the end of the day, we need to determine whether or not the actions of the officer might constitute an offense. It's important to remember that we're involved no matter whether or not there are any allegations of wrongdoing. Because of the deaths, we have to investigate.
Now, the names of the 2 men killed have not been released, at least yet. The IIO will also be checking electronic data from the Mounties car, as well as looking at the speed of the 2 crashed cars and the routes they took, among many other things. Anita, Mike?
Dan Burrett reporting live tonight. Thanks.
5 people, including 3 kids, were taken to hospital yesterday after their pickup truck left the highway and ended up in a creek on Vancouver Island. The group was returning to Nanaimo after a day of tubing on Mount Washington. Their truck headed southbound on Highway 19 near Fanny Bay when it entered the median and went over this embankment, finally coming to stop in a creek. Because of the difficult position, a search and rescue team was called in to get the passengers to safety.
We were called to assist with the Deep Bay Fire Department and the BC Ambulance with a steep embankment rescue of a vehicle. They had several subjects had gone over the embankment. They requested our rope rescue team. These subjects are very lucky. It was a long way down and there's a lot of damage to the vehicle. So yes, there was no fatalities.
The youngest person in the truck was 12 years old. 1 passenger was taken to hospital by air ambulance.
Surrey RCMP are looking for a suspect after reports a man exposed himself to a 10-year-old girl. Happened last Thursday. Police say the girl was walking near Sullivan Heights Secondary School when she was tossed to the ground. The suspect exposed himself before the girl screamed, and he ran off. RCMP are looking for dashcam footage and are hoping to speak to anyone who may have witnessed what happened.
The description is a Caucasian male, either a teenager or in his early 20s, approximately 5'2" to 5'5", with a normal build. At the time of the occurrence, he was wearing a black hoodie, but the hoodie was up and unable to get a decent facial description at this time.
Police are reminding people to avoid shortcuts, including forested or secluded areas, and walk with friends.
RCMP have recovered the body of a missing snowmobiler after an avalanche near Invermere that also killed his father. The pair was riding with a group on Mount Brewer when the slide hit. Saturday, rescuers pulled the 51-year-old Calgary father from 2 meters of snow. He was taken to hospital where he was confirmed dead. RCMP today confirmed his 24-year-old son was swept into the nearby lake. Both deaths are still being investigated. Avalanches have proven deadly in recent weeks. A 42-year-old was also killed this month while skiing in extreme conditions near Pemberton.
A body has been found near Lions Bay in the same area. Search and rescue crews were searching for a missing woman over the weekend. Relatives of Lorraine Prebyszewski reported her missing Sunday after she left a family member's home in the morning. She is originally from Saskatchewan, but has ties to Coquitlam. A search was suspended last night because of darkness, with about a dozen search volunteers starting back up this morning. Well, here's a question. Should kids be able to ride public transit for free? They do in some cities in Europe and elsewhere in North America.
Now, one Vancouver city councillor is making the push for it to happen here as a way to make the city more accessible. Eva Ugwensenj has more.
The cost of a single transit fare for youth up to 18 years old is $1.90 in Vancouver right now. It's more than $1 cheaper than a regular adult fare. But supporters of the All On Board campaign believe that even the reduced price makes public transit less accessible to youth.
If you're a family of 5, it would take about $20 in transit fares to go from East Van to the beach, for example. And a lot of people don't have that kind of money.
Swanson is submitting a motion asking Vancouver Council to endorse the campaign to provide free public transit for all kids in Metro Vancouver. It also proposes that TransLink eliminate fines for fare evasion. But at least one urban planner is warning against offering free transit to certain age groups.
I'm a senior. I get this little plastic orange card, which means I get a reduced fare. I appreciate it very much, but I don't need it. I'm not in that income group. So effectively, this subsidy means that somebody else doesn't get either a better service or isn't going to get it the same value that I do.
Other cities have taken steps to make transit accessible to youth. In Toronto, it's free for kids under 12, and Seattle recently provided free transit passes to high schoolers. Vancouverites are divided on the issue.
Oh, that would help a lot, because I have a 7-year-old that I take to school or I take to appointments, and she's my granddaughter, so as a grandma, it makes it easier.
I think this is stuff that should be totally accessible to kids and students in general.
I don't agree with it, actually, because there's a lot of people that are getting minimum wage that are 20-plus year older, so why is it fair that they are living, trying to pay their transit, trying to get to work?
And Swanson's answer for those worried that getting rid of fines will lead to widespread abuse?
I don't think it's abusive to ride a public transit system.
Councillor Swanson hopes to get the support of her fellow councillors when the motion is presented at City Hall this Tuesday. Eva Ugwensenj, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, thick fog is being blamed for dozens of delays at Vancouver International Airport today. Flights to and from YVR were affected as the fog blanketed much of the area, limiting visibility. Most of the delays and diversions happened this morning between 5 and 9 a.m. Passengers always reminded to check their flight status before heading out to the airport.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. A little bit of fog behind you there in the background.
It's starting to sneak in, Anita. Yeah, we have had quite the day. foggiest one we've had in quite some time across Metro Vancouver, all thanks to a sinking high pressure system, locked in moisture, and interesting sea breezes. But YVR, basically below 0.5 kilometer horizontal visibility since 6 a.m. I want to show you the visible satellite. I've taken a snapshot here. It's in black and white, so you can really see the cloud bank. This is just after 3 p.m. Notice the fog bank stuck in between the island and the lower mainland, right across the strait. Now, normally when we get our sea breezes and our sunshine kicking in towards the afternoon, that overnight fog dissipates. But conditions were just right that the sea breezes were actually strong enough to lock that fog in across the strait, and we saw it sneak in downtown through False Creek and YVR again for most of the day. Notice also the fog stuck in the valleys to the interior as well under very similar conditions. So we have the same setup again tomorrow, but conditions have to be so right for what today to happen over a long stretch. It's not that we don't get them, but I think there's a better chance of seeing that fog mix out a little earlier tomorrow. But be prepared for patchy fog to start the day and for it to linger a little longer for some parts of the south coast. Generally, though, a repeat day across Metro Vancouver, especially if you were in the sunshine. It was a stunner. Temperatures back up to 7 degrees tomorrow. It's the last dry one for a while, so I'll take you through to the rain coming up.
Thanks very much, Johanna.
You're welcome.
The mayor of Surrey has faced a lot of criticism lately for delaying more than $135 million worth of projects, a new arena, rec center, and arts facilities, to name just a few.
But there's one big project that has managed to escape Doug McCallum's chopping block. South of the Fraser, reporter Jesse Johnston has the story.
If you're a runner or a walker, there's no mistaking this sound. Squeaky running shoes. And at Bear Creek Park, where the track is packed even on a weekday morning, the squeaking is loud enough to drown out the chirping birds.
In the summer, it's beautiful, nice flowers in here. It's an attractive place.
It's attractive for a morning stroll.
Everything needs to be redone.
But sports organizations have been demanding upgrades here for years.
These are bleachers and this is an announcing booth. They are old. I think they built it in 1980, and since then they never repair it. And right now it's a very few.
Desange is one of many in Surrey who've persuaded the city to build a new 2,200-seat stadium here. He pictures a world-class destination to host track meets and other sporting events. Also, a place where athletes can train without having to dodge walkers and joggers.
It could be serious when the athlete's gone out from a block and someone comes in front. It will be a serious injury.
We want it to be a more fiscal, stable position today.
Surrey's mayor has taken a great deal of criticism from parents and community groups for postponing projects like a new arena, rec center, and the expansion of arts facilities. But Doug McCallum says the city needs this stadium badly, so it's going ahead while other big-ticket items are delayed.
We look around Surrey in this quadrant of Surrey, which is the northwest. We had a lot of people, and it's where it's absorbed most of the population over the last 10, 20 years, is in the northwest quadrant, that there wasn't enough sports fields.
If all goes as planned, construction will start 2 years from now. The sounds at Bear Creek Park won't change much, but we can't say the same for the bleachers, announcer booth, and just about everything else here. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Surrey.
Well, if you want to share that story with your friends and family, it will be available on YouTube later this evening. Just search for CBC Vancouver. You can also read Jesse's story online at cbc.ca/BC.
And if you're just joining us on your television set, you can tune into our newscast live and on demand, commercial free. We're streaming it every day on our website, YouTube, and Facebook. A random and violent attack on Montreal public transit left her badly injured. Coming up, why seniors advocates are blaming the city for putting her in harm's way.
Good evening to you. If you're joining us on YouTube, Facebook, and our website, cbc.ca, hundreds of people gathered in North Vancouver to celebrate the life of a community dance teacher. Sonia Ellis ran Seymour Dance for more than a decade, inspiring thousands of youth along the way.
As the CBC's John Hernandez tells us, on the weekend, some of her most dedicated students vowed to carry on her legacy.
Behind every great dancer, there's a great teacher. For these girls, that teacher was Sonia Ellis. This was her proudest piece.
She's just completely irreplaceable, and that empty void will never go away.
Sonia Ellis was a lifelong dancer and had come to be known as a pillar in North Vancouver's dancing community. She bought the Seymour Dance School in 2007, where enrollment doubled to 400 students under her leadership.
She just kind of brightened up any room and made it kind of easygoing and made any room feel safe to be vulnerable and push your limits to make our talent what it is today.
Ellis passed away just before Christmas at the age of 44 after a years-long battle with brain cancer. During that time, she would still put her time in teaching at the dance studio. On one of her final days, she watched a live stream of her students performing the Nutcracker from her hospice bed. Today, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate her life and her passion.
I'm going to miss our dinners and stuff together in those fun times. Again, I view my glass as full. When I'm going to view that empty seat at the table, I'm going to remember all those fun times we've had.
Her brother says Sonia was a foodie and wine connoisseur with a particular love for Duran Duran. Her family will take over the beloved school. A dance scholarship for deserving kids will be launched in her honor.
Our goals are to keep her dream alive with that studio and try to do her justice as best we can.
To live in hearts that you leave behind is not to die. I'd like to think that is so for Sonia.
Sonia Ellis leaves behind her partner, her loving family, and countless students who will carry on her legacy. John Hernandez, CBC News, West Vancouver.
Yeah, certainly well known on the North Shore, and a nice tribute to her, ensuring that her legacy will continue.
It's always nice to be able to do stories like that, showcase people in the community who made a difference.
Yeah. Exactly. Just a reminder, you can help us out by giving us your feedback. We appreciate it. You get in touch with us anytime on Twitter. It's also helpful if you like, comment on or share the live stream with your friends and family.
We will be back in just a few minutes with some more news. High-profile federal cabinet minister has been moved out of her job from Justice to Veterans Affairs. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is denying he has demoted Vancouver MP Jody Wilson-Raybould.
And as the CBC's David Cochrane reports, she isn't taking that suggestion well, firing off a blistering defense.
The Honourable Jody Wilson-Raybould.
This was the big surprise and the big demotion.
As the Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence.
Still in cabinet, but moved from the top tier.
Jody has demonstrated tremendous skill in navigating very complex files.
Knowing how this would look, the Prime Minister was prepared.
I would caution anyone who thinks that serving our veterans and making sure they get the care to which they are so justly entitled from any Canadian government is anything other than a deep and awesome responsibility.
But government insiders see it differently. From politicians to senior staff, Liberal insiders describe Wilson-Raybould as difficult to deal with, not a team player.
We heard rumblings in the past few months that you might be shuffled because of a performance issue. If you had to do it again, is there anything that you would do differently?
Well, I can't imagine where you've been hearing that. I am incredibly proud of the work that I did, supported by an amazing minister's staff and by dedicated and hardworking public servants. We accomplished essentially my mandate letter plus.
To drive that point home, she issued a 2,000-word statement defending her record and outlining her achievements, both legislative and non-legislative, during her years as Justice Minister.
That's the CBC's David Cochrane in Ottawa. So the new Justice Minister is Quebec MP David Umeti. a former parliamentary secretary for innovation, science, and economic development.
Former Veterans Affairs Minister Seamus O'Regan becomes the new Minister for Indigenous Services.
And Jane Philpott used to have that job. Now she becomes president of the Treasury Board, the role vacated by Scott Bryson, who is stepping away from politics.
And some Indigenous leaders see this cabinet shuffle as a blow to Ottawa's relations with First Nations here. The head of the BC Union of Indian Chiefs says he was surprised to learn both Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould and Minister Jane Philpott have been shuffled out of their portfolios.
Deeply disappointing. In many ways, it signals the final curtain on Trudeau's grandiose notions of reconciliation and recognition. These were, frontline players in regard to that agenda, and now they're gone, and they're replaced with people we've never heard of before.
He adds it's a critical time for the federal government to build on the inroads already made with Indigenous communities in BC.
The RCMP is defending its actions following last week's arrests of 14 people at a First Nations-led anti-pipeline camp in northern BC.
As the CBC's Leanne Young reports, it comes after their response was heavily criticized.
Young man, go back, young man! This was the chaotic scene. RCMP officers breaking through a roadblock to enforce a court injunction and arresting 14 anti-pipeline protesters last week. Actions that quickly garnered criticism.
It's not an ideal situation, but we have to remember that 100 years ago, if the government decided, well, the railway's going here, nobody was consulted, the government could just do this. That is not the way we do things anymore.
And more criticism today at a National First Nations leaders meeting.
And that word, reconciliation, we know will never be achieved through force. That's not our way. That's not the way to go forward.
During a press conference, the RCMP defended its enforcement plan.
The situation was challenging. The protesters' reaction to the police ranged from passive resistance to active resistance to actual assaultive behavior.
That's what we're hoping for, a peaceful resolution.
Stubbs says RCMP had been engaging with the Wet'suwet'en First Nation since the approval of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. But following the court injunction, anti-pipeline actions escalated. Locals had expressed fears around the number of additional officers brought into the area, but Stubbs says it was necessary.
This is an area that's very remote. It's an area that has a number of people that could swell from 10 to 100. There's a lot of unknowns. So we have to be ready to make sure that we can react to what is presented to us.
Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chief Namox says his people have been traumatized by what happened. A deal has now been struck between the First Nation and Mounties, but the level of trust that RCMP insists is there still needs work.
There has to be trust built, but I think we ourselves are very confident in what we say, and when we say something, we stick to it. The trust must be built from their side to us. How are we going to learn to trust them if they cannot tell us the truth? Or else if they do say something, it's contrary to what they do the following day.
Chief Namox says he didn't see the arrests, but he maintains his people weren't violent. Mounties say a review of their actions will be conducted. A temporary detachment will be opening up in the area to keep the dialogue ongoing with the hereditary chiefs. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
CBC News has learned the identity of the driver involved in Friday's crash in Ottawa that left 3 people dead and 23 injured. Aissatou Diallo had reportedly been driving the bus for less than a year. Today, the city's mayor says the accident has left many people traumatized.
This is an opportunity for us to come together and offer some words of comfort to those who have lost loved ones and to pray for those who are still in hospital recovering.
We've also learned the identities of the 3 people who died in the crash. Police confirmed 2 were passengers on the bus, the 3rd at the bus shelter when it was hit. Dead are 56-year-old Bruce Tomlinson, 57-year-old Judy Booth, and 65-year-old Anya Van Beek. Investigators are still trying to determine why the double-decker bus collided with that transit shelter.
We want to to bring you back to our top story now. An Abbotsford man is facing a death sentence in China after being found guilty of drug trafficking. It's the latest in a period of tense diplomacy between Canada and China after Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou.
And as Evan Dyer explains, it's clear the rule of law is applied very differently in China.
November 2017, Chinese authorities drive 8 men straight from the courtroom where they've been convicted to the place of execution. China carries out about 2,000 executions a year, and many of them, like the 8 men in Shanwei, were convicted of dealing methamphetamine. So it's not that unusual that a man convicted of trafficking nearly a quarter ton of meth would face the death penalty there. Back home in Canada, Robert Schellenberg already had a record for dealing meth and other hard drugs. He pleaded guilty in 2011 to charges in Chilliwack in Abbotsford, BC, where he ran a dial-a-dope operation. But it's rare, although not unheard of, for China to execute Westerners, and unusual for it to reopen a case to change a prison term to a death sentence.
What is unusual is that it is now being referred back by the higher court with a clear remit that it needs to have the sentence being toughened up. It does appear as if it is more politically driven.
In the case of the briefly detained Canadian teacher Sarah McIver, Chinese officials were at pains to stress that it wasn't related to the case of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. But with Schellenberg, there's been no such denial. More evidence the case is political, says Zhang.
What I think our Chinese friends don't understand is that the independent judiciary in Canada is independent.
And Canada's former ambassador to China sees another clue.
They invited foreign journalists to attend the trial. They claim that it's for transparency purposes. Well, if it's the case, they could have started doing that years ago. And therefore, I think all this was orchestrated, and the death sentence was something that was predetermined.
Today, Schellenberg's aunt appealed for help for her nephew. The Schellenberg family requests that all Canadians stand with us and pray for the safe return of our loved one. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Before we begin this next story, a very quick warning. It does contain graphic images. A random violent attack on a public transit vehicle in Montreal left a 92-year-old woman bruised and injured.
She has now decided to go public with the disturbing details of what happened, and seniors advocates are blaming the city for putting her in harm's way. Rosa Marcatelli has that story.
The photo is hard to look at. Henke Fogelman after she was attacked while using what's promoted as a safe city-run transportation service for the disabled and the elderly. As soon as the 92-year-old got in, the driver warned her about the young man sitting next to her.
The taxi driver said not to talk to him. He's a little aggressive. He's a little dangerous.
Minutes into the drive, the man got violent.
He started, like punching and hitting me, and until I started getting, like, from the punch, the blood started coming out from my nose.
Montreal police tell Go Public the man who attacked Fogelman has intellectual disabilities and won't be charged. Her family wants to know why the transportation service, STM, would put a fragile senior next to a passenger who posed a risk.
Why was he even in the taxi? Why would the taxi driver have sat my mother next to him and closed the door and started driving?
The transportation company tells Go Public it had no reason to believe Fogelman was in danger before the attack. So we asked, why then did that driver issue a warning, telling Fogelman not to talk to that stranger beside her? The driver simply wanted to ensure a smooth trip. An STM spokesperson tells Go Public, most of our drivers frequently do this simply as a preventative measure.
Well, I was saddened, but I wasn't especially shocked.
This advocate for older Canadians says these kinds of public transportation services that exist in most major Canadian cities are often lacking in funding and put costs above safety.
It's not about dollars. It's about making sure that people get the care they need and that they're safe while doing it.
I'm still not feeling strong.
It's been 2 months since the attack. Fogelman, who is also a Holocaust survivor, says physically she's on the mend, but she's having a hard time dealing with what she's been through.
It's just in my mind.
The transportation company tells Go Public it doesn't track the number of violent incidents, but says they are very rare. It told the family the man who attacked Fogelman is now banned from using the service. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
Well, you either love them or you really, really hate them. Either way, exterminators say calls are up. So what's being done to tackle the growing rat problem? That's coming up. Thanks for joining us tonight. Here are some of the stories we're following on CBC Vancouver News at 6.
We actually strengthened the policy that requires the Canadian government to always intercede on behalf of a Canadian facing the death penalty anywhere in the world.
Amid heightened tension between Canada and China, a Chinese court has sentenced an Abbotsford man to death. It's after a retrial was ordered last month for Robert Lloyd Schellenberg, who had originally been facing a 15-year prison sentence for drug trafficking.
A deadly early morning crash on Highway 1 near Nanaimo. 2 people are dead. The police watchdog is investigating because the RCMP says an officer tried to stop one of the vehicles before the accident. And they're one of the world's most detested creatures, and they love to call Vancouver and the Fraser Valley home. Rats are a common sight, showing up in alleys, crawl spaces, and garages.
Yeah, even recently, reports of a rat found in a bowl of soup in Vancouver. Our Mickey Cowan now on what's being done to stop the infestation.
Gonna grab some rat traps.
Mike Cobell knows a thing or two about rats. His company spends a third of its time tracking and trapping them. In homes and businesses, at least one call a day, like to this crawl space in the Fraser Valley.
This one is particularly dirty. They've been there for a long time, and so there's a lot of droppings, a lot of urine, and so I will be donning a Tyvek suit that I can dispose of afterwards so that I don't have it all over my clothes, and I'll also be wearing a respirator, and that will prevent me from inhaling any sort of bacteria or viruses that may be there.
Down below, it's a mess. The rats have chewed through wires and water pipes. In the end, 2 dead rats. Cobell will keep coming back until there are none. Then he'll secure the perimeter so they can't get back in. Okay. Calls to exterminators are on the rise. They're often the first defense in the fight against rats. Vancouver's warm climate and proximity to shipping ports makes it a hotbed for rodent life. But it's hard to pinpoint just how large the issue is. Even the city doesn't have a population estimate. That's where Kaylee Byers comes in.
So to get an estimate of the number of rats, you pretty much have to trap in an area until you get no more rats. And that's assuming that you get all the rats, and there could be many rats there that you just never catch because they don't go into traps.
Her team caught 700 rats in alleys in the downtown east side to study their ecology and diseases. It's one of the initiatives the city is funding to try and find out how to get rid of rats. The project found the creatures are disease vectors, carrying C. difficile as well as some fearsome superbugs.
It seems that in addition to the pathogens that rats carry themselves and are sort of famous for carrying, they also act as sponges, and so when they're running through the downtown east side or wherever they happen to be, they can pick up other pathogens as well.
This year, the Rat Project researchers will take things further, visiting other rat-dense cities like Chicago, New York, and New Orleans. The goal is to find best practices and bring them back. But as exterminators know firsthand, it is a massive issue, and it will take a lot more work to tackle the rat invasion.
They're just excellent at surviving. It certainly makes for a challenging problem, but because they are such a threat to health and home, it's got to be dealt with. And so we take it very seriously and make sure that we deal with it quickly for everyone.
Mickey Cowan, CBC News, Vancouver.
And at 6:36 on this foggy Monday evening, here's a live look at the fog in downtown Vancouver. How long will it stick around? That was the Queenie Theatre back there across from our studios. How long it's going to stick around? Johanna's forecast is next.
emergency crews and the military have had their hands full in parts of Europe, working around the clock clearing snow. Nearly 3 meters of snow has blanketed areas in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, causing avalanches, school closures, and stranding thousands of people.
More than 20 people have now died from avalanches or snow-related accidents, and forecasters are predicting even more snow tonight. Wow, they're just getting hammered by it.
Yes, and this has been going on for almost a week now, storm after storm in Europe. So dig out still to happen there. Not here.
No.
It is sift through the fog motion, I think, here.
Yeah.
It was kind of
different kind of fluffy white stuff.
Yeah, it was eerily beautiful though. If it didn't hinder your day,
I love a good fog shot.
So do I. And we haven't had a particularly foggy winter. This is where we get these high pressure systems. We had so many great pictures and photos from you and our colleagues, including, got to take you through Dan Burrett, host of the 11 p.m. Newscast, on his drive into work. No judging his driving skills. I see no error in his hands-free driving. But you can see as he crosses the bridges on the way in how you just see the outline of the city. And there it is, showing up in the blue skies once you crossed over the bridges. A nice little blue sky island downtown was for much of the day. And that being said, the fog really just shrouding southern sections of Metro Vancouver. Victoria was in the blue for most of the day, but once you moved inland towards the valley, that's where we were still stuck in the fog. Kamloops and Kelowna, low visibilities for most of the day as well. So all thanks to that high pressure ridge that is sticking around for one more day again tomorrow. We do have more sunshine in the forecast, but it comes with the risk for some morning fog once again. This high pressure system is going to shift out of the way and allow a new low pressure system to slide in from the southwest, and that one is going to bring us rain for Wednesday. Now, just like the fog is stuck in the valleys, locked in place, so are my weather graphics stuck in on this high pressure ridge. But I think we can take you to the 7-day and show you what we've got coming up in the long range. There we go. 7 tomorrow. If we get out of the fog at YVR, a mix of sun and cloud after that foggy start. If you can get into the sun or get above it, because this is a bit of an inversion, well, definitely an inversion, then you're looking at sunshine and above seasonal temperatures. Increasing cloud through Wednesday. I think we'll get a few spits and spots, but generally drier as we head into Thursday and Friday, though. That's when the rain ramps up. Looks like we have a couple little systems sliding in from the southwest. At this point, I don't see a big washout day until maybe Saturday, but that's getting far enough out in the forecast that we may see some changes. Sunday, at this point, another high pressure system builds in, clearing us out. I'll be watching that trend closely because it looks like we could see a few more days, another round of cold and clear. You notice those overnights getting down there. So, sorry we got stuck on that high pressure, but we got the 7-day out there.
Yeah. Well, and the 5th, was it the 5th was 5 was the temperature, but on Monday coming up, it's supposed to be Blue Monday, so a little sunshine won't hurt.
You know what? We will need vitamin D more than ever on that day. Yeah. Big time.
We don't see a lot of fog delays at YVR, but that wasn't the case today.
No, they were below the minimum visibility for takeoff and landing for the better part of the day. Yeah, so hopefully that sea breeze will kick things out for tomorrow.
Yep.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Britain's parliament gets ready to vote on a Brexit deal. What happens if Theresa May's plan is shot down? That's coming up.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Expand your horizons and catch groundbreaking performances at the Push International Performing Arts Festival, January 17th to February 3rd. And don't miss the Vancouver Short Film Festival. Get your tickets today and celebrate the vibrant community of short film, video, and animation artists. For more on these events, you can check us out online at cbc.ca/BC.
To Britain now, where the Parliament is preparing to vote on Prime Minister Theresa May's deal to take the country out of the European Union. She defended her deal again today, urging MPs to support it for the country's sake.
This House approved the deal tomorrow. It would give us almost 2 years to complete the next phase of the negotiations.
The vote was put on hold in December after it appeared she was likely to lose, but tomorrow the lawmakers will make a decision. There are reports of MPs planning to take control of Brexit if May's deal is shot down. The opposition Labour Party is vowing to table a no-confidence motion if she loses. That move could trigger a general election.
And as the clock ticks down to tomorrow's Brexit vote, CBC's Briar Stewart visits Prime Minister May's home riding of Maidenhead to find out what the public thinks about her leadership.
The British Prime Minister Theresa May is facing the biggest test of her leadership this week, and that's why we decided to come to Maidenhead. This is her home constituency, and we decided to come to a pub because there's always plenty of opinions in a place like this. The so-called meaningful vote on her Brexit deal is taking place in Parliament tomorrow night, and it's widely expected to fail. Because of that, there's a lot of uncertainty over what will happen next, and we certainly heard that from folks we spoke to today.
Get out of it no matter what. Even if it means no deal, just walk away.
Got no confidence in her at all. Needs somebody strong, like possibly Mr. Trump. If he could come over and sort it out, it'd be a good idea.
I feel very sorry for her because she didn't really want Brexit, but she's trying to make the best of it. And every time that she gets to a certain position, she just comes up against a brick wall time and time again.
Our Parliament cannot sort themselves out. There's 600 people in that building, and not one of them knows what's going to happen.
Like the British public, Parliament is very polarized. The leader of the official opposition has said that he's going to call a non-confidence vote in the government, but it's not too likely to succeed at this point because the Democratic Unionist Party, which props up May's minority government, has said that it will support May and the Conservatives on this. However, she's facing challenges on other fronts. Groups of MPs are trying to figure out how to upend parliamentary procedure to wrestle control of the whole Brexit debate and steer just where things go from here on in. All of it has led to uncertainty. Elena Rimiji wrote a book about what it's like for EU citizens living in the UK and what Brexit has meant to them.
We feel unwelcome, sad, tired, angry. Many of us feel betrayed. We lived in this country and thanks to freedom of movement, we were allowed to work, study, live, and all of a sudden, after the referendum, our rights have not been guaranteed.
Hundreds of people are expected to be outside Parliament tomorrow when the MPs do vote on this deal. While there's a lot of unknowns about what will happen next, May is going to have to come back to Westminster within 3 days with a plan B. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Maidenhead.
One of the biggest issues with the Brexit deal is the so-called backstop along the Irish border. It's meant to avoid re-establishing a hard border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, which remains a member of the European Union.
Our Adrian Arsenault traveled to the border to find out how that would affect the people who live there.
If by chance you're a little bored with all the Brexit talk, then spare a thought for the people who live here. This is Pedigo. This is the only town in the British Isles that is cut in half by an international border. So right now, we're in the Republic of Ireland. It's affiliated with the EU. They use the euro as currency. But have a look at that white line on the road. That effectively marks the start of Northern Ireland, which is in the UK. They use the pound sterling for currency. There's no drama about this. People carry both. 30,000 people cross the border every day on this island because they live on one side and work on the other. When the Brexit vote happened, the people of Northern Ireland voted to remain. They want this arrangement to stay the same, but the people of the United Kingdom broadly voted to go. And so now the people here are stuck. The Irish have long memories of violence, of the armed checkpoints, and the bureaucratic nightmares that once separated them. This garage was blown up. People used to take risks smuggling goods across the river, and they fought hard for peace and the level of cooperation they have now. The British Prime Minister Theresa May says she has a plan. She's calling it the Irish backstop. It would just be temporary, but it would mean that for a few years, the people here could keep their clean coordination while a new arrangement is sorted out. Problem is that plan might not be accepted when Parliament votes on it on Tuesday, but also what happens in a few years' time? People here are asking, will they suddenly face roaming charges on their mobile phones when they go from Northern Ireland to the Republic? Will there be a hard border again? They just don't want that. Brexit was not their idea. It's about to become their very big problem. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, about 2 meters into Northern Ireland.
Crowds gathered across Poland today to pay tribute to the 54-year-old mayor of Gdansk, who died after being stabbed during a charity event last night. Pavel Adamovich served as mayor for 20 years. His stand on giving refuge to migrants was at odds with Poland's conservative nationalist government. Adamovich was at a rally on Sunday where money was being raised for medical equipment for hospitals when he was stabbed. The attacker, a 27-year-old man recently released from prison following a conviction for bank robbery. He blamed the mayor's former party for his jail term. Some in the crowds expressed concern about the rise of hatred in Poland.
Generic drugs cost a lot more here in Canada than in most comparable countries. Your prescription may be overpriced by as much as 70%.
Mark Kelly, co-host of CBC's The Fifth Estate, investigates why, and we begin with his hidden camera video of pharmacists discussing kickbacks that would be illegal.
17 pharmacies in 3 days. We took our hidden cameras to see if pharmacy owners would ask for illegal kickbacks to sell generic drugs from our fictitious drug manufacturing company. And they did, time and time again.
When was the deal on it?
The deal on the rebate. What's a comfortable number for you?
70.
70? Okay.
The kickbacks are known as rebates in the pharmaceutical industry. Drug manufacturers pay them to pharmacists and pharmacy chains, anywhere from 40 to 70% of the cost of the drugs to ensure pharmacies will stock their product.
And this is just a small sample, but a typical sample of what we came across.
We showed our hidden camera footage to Dr. Danielle Martin, an advocate pushing to reform Canada's pharmaceutical drug pricing policies.
We know from the economic analyses, from the research, from the evidence on this, that in Canada we pay so much more for generic drugs than other comparable countries do. And so what happens when you're overpaying is people are going to engage in rent-seeking behaviors. They're going to try to get a piece of that profit, a piece of that action, and that's what we're seeing in action right here in these videos that you've got.
The Competition Bureau of Canada released a report which said eliminating rebates and other pricing reforms could save the healthcare system as much as $800 million a year. Toronto doctor Nav Prasad was shocked by what we showed him. He says he deals with patients every day who can't afford the cost of their prescription drugs. And he says rebates are a big reason why.
If these companies can offer kickbacks or rebates of 70%, it means that the medications are overpriced by 70%.
And the consumer is the one paying the tab for this.
There's no one else to pay. I mean, ultimately, it's the people taking these medications who are paying either directly out of pocket, through taxes, or through insurance premiums.
Ontario was the only province to ban rebates. When the ban was introduced in 2010, pharmacists fought it. So did the then opposition healthcare critic, Christine Elliott.
The McGuinty Liberals are vilifying pharmacists, but
Elliott is now Ontario's health minister. We asked her office what the minister planned to do about these pharmacists asking for illegal kickbacks and the drug companies who are paying them. In a statement, the minister wouldn't comment on the findings of our investigation or even commit to look into what we found, only saying Suspicious activity should be reported. In the meantime, kickbacks will continue to be paid across Canada, and Canadians will continue to pay some of the highest generic drug prices in the world. Mark Kelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, some sea lions are causing quite a stir in Powell River. A massive colony of the animals has taken up residence in the area. Give you a closer look right after the break.
Well, they're loud and they're smelly.
And they become a star attraction in Powell River. We're talking about sea lions. Hundreds of them all converged at Second Beach. Residents say they started arriving around Christmas, and now there are so many they've covered nearly every inch of the barges, beach, and breakwater in the area.
Sea lions are known to end up here, but residents say it's rare to see this many. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans has put up a sign warning people not to interact with the animals.
Almost look like La Jolla there in California.
Yes, that's
sea lions,
true.
right?
Yeah, go down to the pier. I mean,
and it's Powell River.
It's Powell River.
Yeah, exactly. That's very cute to me. Okay, history was made in pro sports last night by a woman.
Down judge in this game. She's the first woman to earn an on-field assignment for an NFL playoff game.
That is Sarah Thomas. She became the first woman to officiate a National Football League playoff game.
Yeah, it's just the latest in a long line of trailblazing firsts in her 20-year career. Thomas is the first woman to work a college football bowl game and then the first woman to work as an on-the-field official in the NFL.
That's awesome, especially in the NFL where it is, you know, it's quite male-dominated.
It is very male-dominated.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Making waves.
Yeah. All right, you can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock after the National, and that is with Mr. Dan Burrett.
Have a great night. Thanks for watching.